Infinity present AI Pioneering Change for Industries and Society, brought to you in association with Moneycontrol and CNBC TV 18. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into AI and the profound impact this technology can have on all walks of the industry and society. Intel, for decades, has been at the forefront of globe's digitization journey. And in India, we have Reliance Jio, which has catapulted India's digitization journey on the world map with high speed internet for all and cutting edge technology like AI, ML, AR, VR. To talk about how we can harness this power of AI, we're now joined by Dr. Nash Palaniswamy, Vice President, Sales and Marketing Group, General Manager of AI, High Performance Computing, Data Centers, Accelerators, Solution and Sales at Intel Corporation, and Dr. Shailesh Kumar, the Chief Data Scientist, Center of Excellence, AI ML at Reliance Jio. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Dr. Nash, starting with you, where are we currently in this AI journey? We all know that COVID has resulted in compressed digital transformation. So a digitization journey, which would have otherwise taken 4 or 5 years, is now being compressed into 1 to 2 years. So what are the big, broad trends that we are seeing in AI currently?
Absolutely, right. If you look at AI itself, I like to break it up into two main categories. One of them is your traditional machine learning, and the other is the upcoming deep learning technologies, right? Like computer vision, natural language processing, etc. Right? And contrary, right, to popular belief, the biggest bucket within AI is machine learning, right? Which includes a whole slew of algorithms, right, that improve the exposure to like more data over time, regression, classification, clustering, decision trees, and more, right? And deep learning is kind of like your brain, right? It's supposed to replicate the neural networks, and that is the one that people are using for computer vision and natural language processing, and they're moving into other areas other than computer vision and NLP with the neural networks. But most of the business-related functions, right, are typically done with your machine learning kind of approaches, right? Like if you want to send something to to the moon or Mars, you're trying to use traditional machine learning math models, right? The mathematicians have come up with to go and do those critical stuff. But when you get onto Mars, you're actually using deep learning kind of efforts to get to your AI stuff, right? So that is the big trend. People are trying to see how they can use more deep learning in enterprises. Machine learning, if you look at it, is already prevalent in enterprises. Most enterprises use AI machine learning techniques to run their business. For example, forecasting, people use technologies such as XGBoost. And there are lots of startups trying to create technology which will help in AI deep learning acceleration, because the big bottlenecks that people are seeing today is in the training part of, hey, you know what, I'm going to train a model to be the brain, but you got to put lots and lots of data in there to train. And that aspect is where you see a lot of startups which are trying to do some AI accelerators. In fact, Intel bought a startup called Habana to help there. We also have GPUs which are coming up for the US exascale system, which is expected next year, to also help in that training aspect. But from an inferencing standpoint, which is when you create a model, right, and you start figuring out, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you the input, it's going to work like your brain. People are using technologies within your normal processors to do inferencing, right? So the big trend is to use CPUs to do inferencing. For example, right, if you look at even your laptop today, right, you may have seen some of these background that you put in your video conferencing. That is using technology which is there in the CPU today. We call it DL Boost, and that is used for AI when we are actually having this conversation. And sometimes AI is also used to do some audio processing, right? Remove some signal to noise kind of efforts, right? So effectively, if you look at the big trends, on the enterprise side, machine learning is well established, right, with Spark, normal math algorithms. On the enterprise side, deep learning, people are doing a lot of projects expect these to become like real projects in the next few years. And on the other enterprise, like if you look at computer vision and NLP in health and life sciences, especially like you mentioned, right, with the COVID type of effort, we've had a lot of people expediting AI, which we'd have thought will take 4 or 5 years. People have come up with computer vision techniques to go and figure out, hey, you know what? Do you have COVID? Take a lung X-ray and figure out, what has happened, right? People have come up with technologies really quickly, and that has been a big trend on the enterprise health and life sciences standpoint. And on the telco standpoint, people have been using traditional Spark machine learning techniques, right, to figure out if your network is fine and your channel quality indicators are fine. Now what they've done is they've done a combination of an end-to-end data pipeline using, we have some tools and libraries which we call analytics zoo, and combining it with with deep learning, right, to actually go and figure out how to have a reliable network again in this environment where we've been in lockdown for more than a year. Having reliable networks, reliable health and life sciences, reliable diagnosis has really sped up, the use of AI in critical areas. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, as Dr. Nash was saying, that we've made remarkable progress on the machine learning side of the business. And, very simply, for say someone like me, I know AI has made inroads into my life when I know that Netflix, for instance, is giving me personalized recommendations. Or now when I have a banking query, it's a chat bot that I'm talking to. So in my life as well, I've seen that over the last few years, we have seen AI pervade into the way I shop, the way I consume my content, the way I travel perhaps. But as he said, deep learning is going to be the next focus area. So we've just scratched the surface in this limitless possibilities. Can you throw your thoughts on where we are currently in AI and how you see the future?
Yeah. So let me add to what Dr. Nash said. So basically, I see, 7 trends that are very critical that are going to happen and are happening, right? So let me just go through the list of trends. So one is what I call the convergence of technologies, which is like, AI is not the only technology. AI combined with cloud, with 5G, with AR, VR, with optimization, with devices, all of these together as a convergence of technologies is the new ecosystem. AI is a very important part of that ecosystem, but there are 7, 8 other technologies that have come together in a serendipitous way, in a very unprecedented way. And that convergence is a very important thing because AI alone, without cloud, without connectivity, without devices, cannot do anything. So this is the new era and a recognition that we are in the midst of a convergence of technologies. Second trend that I see is the social applications of AI, right? So far AI has been very nicely used in applications like search engine or Netflix and retail and advertising and marketing and sales. But now we are going to see a resurgence of AI in applications such as healthcare, agriculture, education, smart cities, environment, and crime protection and all that stuff. So I think there's a new kind of AI applications that will emerge, which will transform society in a very profound way. What we have done so far is like a trailer, right? In the last 20 years, that we can scale AI at a planet level. We can use modeling frameworks that can continuously improve with new data. So we have understood how to deploy AI at large scale. What we are going to do is now apply it to social use cases, right? That's a new era that we are going to start. And if you look at India's national policy of AI and all that, everybody's talking about AI for social good, AI for everyone and all that. So that's the second trend. The third trend that I see is what I call ecosystem intelligence, which is we have learned the art of building individual models, right? How to do Netflix better, how to do, search better, how to do one thing better. But now if we want to build a next generation product, like a smart city as a product, or an entire agriculture ecosystem as a product, or telecom as a single product, right? Or entire healthcare ecosystem of a country as a product. These are what we call ecosystem products, which are very, very complex. And our mindset has to shift from simple thinking of how to build individual models to what is an AI architecture of these ecosystems. And that is the next level thinking in AI that will develop, called the ecosystem thinking of AI. And like Dr. Nash was suggesting some examples on that, right? The next thing is contextualization, localization, and personalization will increase. Contextualization is about, if you have done face recognition in one set of data, it doesn't work in another set of data, right? So how do we make it contextual for all countries, for all languages? When we talk about localization, a lot of chatbots work in English, but not in, let's say, 22 Indian languages. So now later, recently you've seen a lot of work by Google and Microsoft and other companies, Reverie from Geo, in terms of AI in different languages, right? Language localization is happening. Personalization will continue to increase, right? We have seen personalization in media consumption and things like that, but we are going to see personalization in other areas like agriculture, healthcare also, and education especially. And the last trend I want to talk about is automation is going to happen, which is not happening yet. As in, AI is still a passive thing. It is not proactive yet. And this automation technologies like event-based architectures plus AI will create a new kind of magic that has never happened before. So these are, in my view, the 7 trends that we will see.
Very, very interesting. Dr. Nash is taking forward the first point that Dr. Kumar made, that we now are seeing a convergence of 7 cutting edge technologies, which is AI, 5G, cloud, AR, devices getting smarter, which will converge to create an ecosystem which can transform society. And I think the 3 segments that he spoke about were agri, healthcare, as well as education. So now in healthcare, for instance, now COVID has already resulted in a greater adoption of telemedicine, or remote monitoring of patients has picked up considerably. If you could tell us about some AI solutions or use cases that Intel is deploying to improve the customer experience in, say, agri, healthcare, as well as education to create a frictionless experience.
Absolutely. So, before I get into, the question, I think Dr. Sailesh made some very interesting comments, right? And I just gave a virtual keynote at Computex, and I asked my mom, who's 82 years old, she'll be 83 this year, to listen to it. And, she came back, and I actually had, the president of Zoom products, Velu, on my, um on my keynote, and she listened to the whole thing, and she said, what, I didn't understand anything you said, but I understood everything Velu said about Zoom, right? So, and basically, she could understand how the audio was better, the backgrounds. You could put a video, you could put an image, and all that captured her imagination of AI. And I just wanted to give another perspective, right, in terms of AI and how it actually affects every person on this planet. Uh, and I found it very interesting. My mom's feedback. I was like, wow, you actually got that few minutes rather than the 40-minute keynote. And so I gave that feedback back to Velu, who happens to also be my classmate from Anna University in Chennai. With that said, AI, right? I mean, if you look at some of the big focuses, we have a new CEO at Intel, Pat Gelsinger, and some of the big focuses that he has, right? The 4 big verticals is, AI is pervasive across every vertical. Okay, you're going to have AI applications in network. You'll have it in client, in your laptops, in your cell phones, in the data center. So, interesting times with AI. Like all the trends that Dr. Sailesh said is a reality. AI is a big part of what is happening. And big, if you look at the 4 big trends, right? It's AI, it's cloud, it's 5G, and then the intelligent edge, right? We look at it in 4 different verticals. And we at Intel are making sure that we are getting products to our customers so that they can be number one, as well as Intel being number one in all of these. Okay. With that said, I'll give you some examples, and I think you were asking for some examples. So instead of agriculture, I'm going to give you an interesting story on what is aquaculture. Okay, aquaculture is basically the farming of freshwater and saltwater fish and other aquatic creatures and plants. Significant industry in the Nordics, where climate and natural conditions make it ideal, right, for fish farming such as salmon, right? But you have to make sure that you have to feed them, right? And there's enough, light and water, so that you're going to feed them at the right time, right? So farmers often have trouble getting a clear idea of what is happening during the feeding process. Okay, so a poorly managed feed process is going to be a lot of waste. So the food is all going to go away. You got to find the right time with all the fish to feed them. So the stakes are high here, right? So without reliable technology, you're going to be in trouble. Right? So last year, Intel collaborated with Telenor, Nokia, and Blue Grove, right, to deliver an aquaculture video monitoring, right, to a remote island in Norway. The application is enabled by emerging 5G and edge networking technology. Telenor's 5G service provided bandwidth, needed for real-time data transfers, right, from the fish cages to the edge server. And so basically what they did was with data analytics and no lag time, Intel architecture technology played a key role in delivering the compute density, right, to enable the edge computing. And by implementing the video analytics, you could actually go and make sure that you fed the fish at the right time, right? So this is an example of aquaculture. You can imagine you can do it with the same thing with the agriculture, right? With video analytics, videos all over, and figuring out, when to go and water the plants, or if there are some bugs there, some pests, we can go figure it out. So that's where I think a combination of video analytics and AI can really make a difference. I think Rima, you had a question in your mind, it looks like.
No, I just, I also wanted, that's very interesting. I heard what you said, at least in the early part about the aquatech part. But a lot of, what appears, again, it's not that I'm an expert and I have insight into what is happening, but the understanding is that, say now if you use 5G as well as AI, as well as the other cutting edge technology that we're working with, Dr. Nash, we will not only be able to do the existing tasks with a lot more efficiency, and we will be able to optimize it. What we will soon be staring at are brand new revolutionary use cases. So if you could just throw some more color on that, and some more use cases, somewhere interesting products that are being built.
Well, I think there's lots of interesting products being built, right, in terms of what computer vision and video analytics and computing can do, right? So, I'll give you a simple example, right? Just in my house, right, we have video cameras all around the house, right? It's really, not to get at burglars, right? I live, behind me is a forest, about, 200 plus acres of nature preserve. So we have a lot of snakes that come in, right? And these video cameras today can actually like, detect motion, and they'll immediately tell me, hey, something is moving here, right? But today they're really not smart enough, for me, to actually tell me, hey, you know what, this is what moved. It was a person. It kind of tells you it's a person, but it doesn't tell you whether it's a rabbit, it's a snake, it's a coyote. We have all those, critters, in my backyard. And but I'm really worried, right? People have been bit by snakes here, right? In Austin and in my neighborhood, actually my neighbor. So with that said, I think the future technology, right, the use cases with 5G is going to enable all this video, right, to actually go back to some centralized servers and come back and tell you, you know what, hey, we saw a snake here, right? You better go and act on it right away, right? Because today I have to go act on every little thing, right? So things are just going to, get revolutionized to something that you can imagine that you can imagine like 30 virtual people sitting around your house and making sure you're safe, right? So that's a simple example of what I see the future, right, in terms of 5G, AI, plus vision at the edge, and AI processing, somewhere in Reliance Jio with a lot of servers just coming back with answers for you.
Dr. Kumar, Geo also has a focus on the education side. And I think you started off by talking about education, as a way to transform the society. Can you talk about how we can redefine education, reshape a virtual classroom with the implementation of AI, AR, VR?
Correct. So I'll talk about 4 areas, right? Education, healthcare, agriculture, and smart cities. So if you look at education, right, like one of the most delicate processes that human beings go through is education and learning, right? And it's supposed to be the most personalized journey that every student should have had. But if you look at our current ecosystem of education, which is a 200-year-old British system of education, right? One teacher, one NCRT textbook teaching the same thing to all the students at the same pace is the one size fits all education system. And one of the great promises of AI across all ecosystems is personalization at scale, right? And that is what is possible now, that within education, AI will be able to personalize or know exactly what a student knows, what he doesn't know, what to teach him next, what kind of questions he should be given next, what kind of problems and homework he should do next, what topic he should study next, what content he should consume next, right? So hyper personalization of education, uh, and in his own language or her own language, right? And with the right teacher who teaches at the same frequency, the way students can learn, right? So how do you match students and teachers? It has nothing to do with which school you go to and which school the teacher teaches in. We have changed the idea of what is a school now, and it's almost ready to be changed, right? Students today are learning from, all the way from Byju's, Khan Academies, Imbibe, everything, and not just from the school. And then this idea of school has changed, and the idea of personalized education is coming now at a very big scale. So education will be transformed in that way, and it will be a hybrid education system. That means you will learn, part of education will be digital, where you can consume content, watch a video again and again by the best teachers in the world in your language. That is the learning part of education. And the physical part of education, where you go and do hackathons with your classmates, play football, do plays and other things, and work with your teachers to do projects and other experiments, is the physical part of education. So this physical digital transformation of education is inevitable, right? And we have already tasted the purely digital. Now, during COVID days, we have tasted the purely physical before the COVID days. And now we are ready to create a hybrid education system, which will have all these additional benefits of AI inbuilt, right? And, I've given a lot of talks around how education will be transformed. Let me talk a little bit about agriculture and healthcare also. Within agriculture, if you look at today's agriculture ecosystem, it's still very inefficient, in the sense that we don't understand the supply demand of different crops and perishables in the different parts of the country. The farmers are still struggling with the right practices and what to do next in their local languages. We don't have enough experts. So and the value of satellite data, soil IoT, weather data, knowledge of agriculture, and an agricultural expert who can put it all together, right? Again, contextualization, localization, personalization of the right advisory to the right farmer at the right time, at the right stage, in the right language, right? And not just advisory, but also helping him with equipments and Uberization of the farming equipment, and connecting him to the right mandi. So the overall efficiency of the ecosystem increases, not just the individual farmer's income, but overall, the supply demand, the wastage goes down, and everybody makes a lot more money, right? And the reduction in using of wrong chemicals. All this can be done with AI today. And for example, we are looking at how to build chatbots for farmer advisory, because Geo has this. So the Reliance Foundation is now addressing millions of farmers across the country, and we are trying to now, instead of going from physical connect to a physical expert of agriculture in each language, we are going to automate some of the backend, right? So how do you build chatbots for farmers in 22 Indian languages for all crops, for all possible problems they can have, right? That's an ambitious goal to have. And that will really invigorate our farmers into a much more different kind of farming. And healthcare, again, a lot of applications, if you will. One of the missing pieces in healthcare, I think, is the electronic health record in India, right? If you look at UK and US and some of the other countries, they have a very nice centralized place where all electronic health record is there. And once that foundation is built, and the national initiative on healthcare is there, a lot of companies have now understood the value of knowing your genomic data, your past medical history, your past medication stored in one place, all your previous test results, all your Fitbit data coming together in one place. and then using that to build proactive advisories and say, hey, this patient, in the next 5 years will have this problem. He should start working on it now. How do we build diagnostic systems which are richer and better, as good as doctors? Because especially in our villages and tier three cities, we don't have access to a lot of good doctors in all local languages. So can AI help you diagnose by asking the right questions and say, hey, you have possibly these five diseases and you should see this kind of a doctor, or you can have a home remedy to take care of it, right? Those kind of things. Then in healthcare, public healthcare is a very big area, right? How do you deal with emerging problems like the new variants of a virus, or supply chain issues coming up, or lack of nurses and hospitals in different areas? How do you see the public healthcare going? This is another area where both individual and public healthcare will get invigorated with AI.
Very interesting insight. So AI can address a majority of these seemingly unsolvable issues across these social verticals. But Dr. Nash, as Dr. Kumar said, that AI has the potential to transform at scale. AI is present, but we are nowhere near at scale. So how can Intel help enterprises in AI adoption? And if you could tell us the kind of challenges that could impede this progress.
Absolutely. So, firstly, all the comments that you made about, education is so important. I think the whole hybrid nature, I mean, I have a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I see, the difference, right? At a complete virtual environment hasn't been very healthy, but I think a hybrid environment will actually be very, very useful moving forward, right? So, that is, something that is going to like change the way, right? I think. Kids come out of school, and how education is going to happen in the future, right? So with that said, let's talk about enterprise, right? The question you asked is, when is AI going to be like prevalent in the enterprise, right? So, like I mentioned, machine learning, right, is pretty well established, right, with Spark and data analytics today, and the deep learning, lots of projects which are being done, a lot of POCs. But the big thing with enterprises is, they are very, very ISV driven, right? They don't necessarily like to be, developing most of this stuff, right? A lot of the scale that happens in enterprise is when there's an ISV that can actually produce and provide, software which is easy plug and play, right? So one of the things we did was, from an Intel standpoint, we made sure that we focus on three specific areas, right? One is, you need an ecosystem, right, for the enterprise to actually use. So we created something called AI Builders, AI in production for Edge. And AI Builders was really focused on enterprise applications. So, and we tried to create these application space for enterprise so that, the enterprises can actually adopt, right? Typically, they think several times before they adopt. They try to build their own software or get software from somebody who's not well established, right? So we have created this big ecosystem, right? The second one is the developer ecosystem within the enterprise, right? When they use the ISVs, they also add, extra stuff on it using Python and stuff like that. So we actually created what we call Analytics Zoo, right? And we also provide optimized libraries for deep learning frameworks. So we have created this layer which allows you to actually get to an application faster within the enterprise. And the third aspect of stuff is, you know, AI is an application which is running on a high performing infrastructure, right? And so effectively people think that AI and the hardware and software like that, right? And enterprises like to use a solution in the data center which is diverse in nature, right? They don't really want to have stuff which is dedicated and then it's dark for most of the time. So your investment is not fully there, right? So one of the things Intel has been trying to do is make sure that we infuse AI into our processes, right? We call it deep learning boost technologies. We already have machine learning boost with AVX 512 for a long time, right? And so that's one of the things we're trying to do is to make it easier for enterprise to adopt, not only from like the brains part of it, like the ISV software, the ecosystem, and also from the infrastructure, part of it by infusing it so that you can use it for diverse workloads, right?
Mhm.
You don't want, you really want something that you can use across the board, right? You don't buy, that's one of the reasons why when you're buying something personally for yourself, right, you're looking at a diverse usage for those types of buys that you're doing. And last but not the least, open standards are important for the enterprise, right? And we are trying to drive open standards, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. You have a USB stick for sure somewhere,
Mhm.
right? And that was created with open standards, right? What that did was every person on this planet somehow uses a USB stick today, right? Somewhere and uses USB, right? That's what Intel is all about, right? We want to drive open standards in the industry. So we're driving something called One API, right? Which is an open standard for developing on heterogeneous systems, developing on high performance infrastructure. Okay, so in the future, you can basically use or develop software which will work on any infrastructure, including our competitors, right? Our vision is we want to have open standards for heterogeneous computing. We want to make sure it's easier for enterprises to adopt AI and new technologies using open standards.
Absolutely well said, Dr. Nash. Just on the subject of the ecosystem, Dr. Kumar, you said that how electronic health records need to take on board the Fitbit data to provide a proactive data. Right now we have all the building blocks in place, but they're still not fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. Your thoughts on how we can get this ecosystem up and running in India to get the optimum results from AI and other technologies?
Right. So you're right. I think, like every other technology, it starts bottom up, right? And then, we have reached a stage of remarkable maturity in the bottom up thinking, but not yet in the top down thinking, right? So there are four key elements that I think the ecosystem needs. One is what I call democratization of everything: democratization of data, democratization of modeling, democratization of compute resources, so that everybody can participate in that ecosystem, either as a producer of data or label data, as a producer of models, as a consumer of models, as a consumer of data. Think of a marketplace, think of democratization, right? And we need digital frameworks for democratizing AI. And what does that mean is that if I'm a student in a IIT, I did a PhD on the best speech to text model in Bengali, I should be able to produce that and enable millions of Indians to consume it with a few clicks of button. I should not just write my thesis and submit a paper. I should be able to enable that to be delivered to the country, right, in some way. Now, this path between research and impact is very long right now, right? It sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't happen. A lot of AI is buried there. But I think democratization frameworks backed up by large scale compute infrastructure will really help. And the Ministry of Information Technology is talking about platforms like Eravat, which will democratize data sharing and model sharing, which is a very great initiative, and all of us should participate in that. How do we bring in students, researchers, startups, big companies, individual freelance data scientists, all of them to kind of contribute to this ecosystem, right? So democratization of AI is very important. Um, Second is integration, like you said, right? We have all the building blocks, but we have not put them together, right? And I think we need a framework like that. And the way, at least in Reliance, I got an exposure to how to think like that. So when I look at telecom, I don't look at one model or two model. I look at an entire AI architecture for telecom, an AI architecture for hydrocarbons. Similarly, there is an AI architecture for agriculture, healthcare, and education. We just have to figure out all the APIs. The problem is that one startup is doing 5 APIs very well. Government is thinking of another 25. Another large company is only doing 3 of them. How do we integrate all that is not going to happen if each one of us is trying to capture the whole space. We need to say, this is what I'm good at, this is what you are good at, let's integrate. Because the end solution is far more than the sum of the parts, right? Like the farmer is not looking for a very good hyperspectral image to disease detection model only. He's also looking at weather prediction based forecasting. He's also looking at multi pricing. He's also looking at where to get the next fertilizer. He's also looking at advisory. He's also looking at many things. He's also looking at speech to text and text to speech, so that the whole advisory system works for him. So when we do solution thinking and we say agriculture is what we need to solve, we don't think of the individual building blocks. We say we need all of them, right? So these are two kinds of thinking. AI thinking is all about data thinking, feature thinking, modeling thinking, deep learning, machine learning thinking. But solution thinking is the other way around, which says, whatever it takes, let's make the farmers' income double. Whatever it takes, let's make sure Corona never happens in the world, right? And we work backward from solution into an architecture, into individual building blocks. So that mindset shift has to happen, and that is a very important thing. The third thing is what is not happening and which we are struggling with is this idea of institutionalizing AI thinking in the minds of the leadership. So our leadership is today still, in a lot of companies is IT thinking people, right? For them, AI thinking is a different beast altogether. How come it's not working on day one, for example, right? How come it takes iterations to work? How come it's not 100% accurate? These kind of things are still, alien to them, because IT thinking, they know once you have installed, it works. There are bugs, we fix, and it works. But AI thinking is very different. A machine learning model is going to improve over time. It's not going to work on day one. So you need to change the mindset. Second, we need to change the mindset that you cannot think of silos of data, silos of models, and say, we can do this in silos. We cannot do things in silo. So integration mindset has to come in. Um, the next thing is in institutionalizing, people are not yet sure. We have read lots of blogs, we have understood bits and pieces, and we are not able to figure out, is there a template, is there a process of how AI is institutionalized into a large enterprise? What are those building blocks? Is there a systematic process to do it? Like if I have to build a house, there is a systematic process to do it. But when I have to institutionalize AI, there's no systematic process to it. Everybody is experimenting with it. So I think that that framework has to evolve, and people who have done it in their own silos. Google has done it in its own silo, Netflix has done it, but they don't know how to do it in other areas. So how do we institutionalize AI thinking? And the last thing is, how do we build trust in people, right? And which is very important. Why would a patient trust an AI doctor compared to a real doctor, right? Why would a farmer trust a AI expert versus a human expert, right? So trust in AI is still a last mile thing that we have to build. In spite of doing democratization, integration, and institutionalization, trust is another area, and explainability and other things. If they come together, these four things, if they come together, then we will really realize the true potential of AI for all these verticals.
Okay, integration, a framework, the AI way of thinking, all that has to come together. Since I have both you gentlemen on the same platform, I have to ask you about the partnership that Intel as well as Reliance Jio have, which obviously wants to leverage, the digitization journey of Geo as well as various other enterprises. So, Dr. Nash, if you could tell us what is the value, according to you, that Intel brings to Reliance Jio in their AI transformation journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, Dr. Sailesh, we are happy and privileged, right, to work and partner with Reliance Jio on AI, and everything else we do together, right? You know, the value that Intel brings, right, right off the bat is, we're about open standards, right? We're making sure that we're driving open standards, which will help, companies such as Reliance Jio. And we'll also be getting a lot of feedback from Reliance Jio to drive the open standards, right? So that's one key thing, right? The world has to be on open standards. It cannot be on proprietary standards. The second part is, my team personally is working on opportunities and with customers around the world, right? Just like what Dr. Shailesh said, right? Everybody's in their own journey. Every customer's got a different way by which they're bringing in AI. And, we get a good view of, how much of AI is actually getting deployed and the others, why it's not getting deployed, right? So, at the front end, right, of a lot of, ideas that Reliance Geo may be thinking of, my team will be of great help, right, to give feedback, bouncing ideas, right? For example, I'm just going to throw it because I love sports, right? And imagine a world, right, where You can take the knowledge of all these top coaches, and they never have to be there, and you put it in an AI package, and all you have to do is take a Reliance Jio phone, and a little kid in a village can look at his batting, grip, his batting swing, and he gets feedback and advice, right? And becomes a better sportsman, right? I mean, that's the vision I have for AI, at least, because I'm a cricket geek, and so that's where I can see everything going there, right? So, getting that feedback, back to companies like Reliance with the broad base of AI opportunities we do from a machine learning and deep learning standpoint is going to be very useful for Reliance Geo, right? And one of the other things that we bring also is we also have a one API set of products, our CPUs, which are infused with AI, and all of them help, better the TCO for anything Reliance Geo is thinking of in terms of deploying solutions. And data is a big part of, what we need for AI deployment in the world. And effectively, Intel's big focus, right, is also on data, right? We have several technologies which is under the Intel Optane umbrella, which helps you, run big AI. Okay, today is super expensive to run big AI just on what we call DDR memory, right? But we have a new technology, Optane, which reduces the the capex that you would need to go run some big AI, which is what Reliance Jio will be doing, right? The amount of data that Jio is going to have for AI is going to be tremendous, probably more than anybody else on this planet. Okay, and we're looking forward to it, right? So effectively, we want to make sure we have a big ecosystem that we can offer Reliance Jio, right? Through our AI builder programs, AI production programs. We want to provide the best optimized software, right? Which Reliance Jio can use for their AI. And lastly, there's not one solution which works across the board for Reliance Jio, right? They can have AI at the edge, AI on the towers, AI in the data center, and one solution doesn't fit all, right? We all know that. So we have a flexible solution with where we have infused AI right in the CPU with our DL Boost technology. We have VPUs, we have a GPUs coming up, we have a FPGAs, which Reliance Jio already probably uses extensively. So we want to make sure we are providing all the building blocks for Reliance Jio and also our knowledge as we work with several customers around the world. So we're looking forward to working with Reliance Jio and getting AI to the next level, in India, and I'm excited.
And we're looking forward to the kind of magic the two of you will create. So, open standards, feedback, AI powered products like a CPU, data, software solutions. Anything, Dr. Kumar, that you would like to add? The kind of role Intel is playing and the value addition it is providing in your journey?
Yeah, I think Intel is one of the foundation and very critical partners for Geo, along with many others. And we rely on companies like Intel to provide what we call the core foundation of compute. Compute, whether it is at the cloud level, at the edge level, at the 5G level, at the sensor level, at the devices level, right? So I think Intel has been doing it forever now, since we were kids. We used to study Intel processors, and now it's continuing to show that leadership everywhere. And with the AI revolution, Intel has really adopted and energized that ecosystem by transforming its hardware, which is a lot of AI enabled hardware, built specifically for different applications, whether it's video streaming or IoT processing, edge computing, inferencing separately, training separately. They have different hardware stacks. So it's amazing how Intel, and other such companies have pioneered this art of bringing AI to the hardware level, right? Like, we used to hear about signal processing, and then suddenly we came up with digital signal processing chips. So signal processing went from a software mathematical thing to software thing to a hardware thing. Similarly, AI is going from being a concept on a PPT to a MATLAB program to a hardware now, right? And companies like Intel are pioneering that, and which is really helping us get there. And I'm sure the next wave of quantum computing is another thing we are looking forward to, which is what quantum can do for AI, and companies like Intel and many others are working on that. So that is another area that we'll do. But we rely on companies like Intel to provide And like Dr. Nash said, our telecom ecosystem alone has more customers than the entire US population, the entire US population, right? And the entire European population. So just imagine the amount of data that we get. And I'm just talking about one business, telecom, and we have 5 such businesses, right? So clearly, Geo is one of the largest, um, uh, you know, uh, data rich company in India at least, and with that much data, we need all these, very powerful compute, and we are very grateful for this partnership with Intel, and we are helping each other understand the use cases and keep challenging each other in terms of, can we do this better, can we do that better, and how do we keep pushing the barrier on both, we coming from the application side, Intel coming from hardware and technology side. I think it's a very good marriage, and we look forward to working with Intel in the long term. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Nash, Dr. Kumar, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to both of you. Some very interesting insights are coming on how we can harness this power of artificial intelligence to expand the human potential. Thank you once again for joining in into this conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you, Dr. Sailesh. Thank you, Rima. Have a great day.
Thank you.